What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill," and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. For just as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is also dead. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Today we address the third question in our sermon series for the summer. The first was, where are you from? The second question was, where do you hurt? And today's question is, what do you need? I start with a story about people in need, and specifically a woman whom I'm going to call Sally. As many of you know, before moving back here to my hometown of Greenville, I served as the pastor of a congregation in Richmond, Indiana. Richmond is a community of about 40,000 right on the Indiana-Ohio border. It was once pioneered along the National Trail. By the early 1900s, Richmond had become a thriving community with its own theater, opera house, industries, and the largest per capita number of millionaires in the country. But when I arrived in 2007, the county was the third most poverty-stricken county in the state of Indiana. Across the street from the church on one side was this huge, ornate, old hotel that had been turned into a beautiful senior living center. And across the park, on the other side of the church, was an abandoned home where the homeless sometimes slept. Richmond was also the home of one of the state's mental hospitals. And unfortunately, when some of the patients were discharged, they didn't have families to go back to and places to go, and they were set up in a place in town and sometimes ended up on the streets, homeless. Poverty, drugs, and mental illness contributed to a growing number of people in real need in the community. People would show up at the doors of all the churches in town, desperately looking for help. Some were looking for help for real legitimate needs, medicine, food, a place to sleep at night. And others were looking for money so they could buy drugs. Soon after I arrived, some of the other pastors and I formed a steering committee to establish a nonprofit where we could pool our resources to better serve the community in need. And that helped tremendously. But still, some people came to the door of the church. And they knew I didn't give out money. And I would refer to them to places that could do a better job helping them with all of their needs. And still some came. And one of those, I'll call Sally. That's not her real name. Sally would show up 2 or 3 times a month, and then there would be a gap of maybe a month or 2, and then she would start coming again regularly. And I always opened the door for Sally. I would greet her with a smile and say, "What do you need today, Sally?" And she would sometimes look down at the food pantry box by the door. I would tell her to take what she needed. She'd pick up 1 box of cereal or maybe a box of crackers. And then she would sit down on the pew by the door and talk. Other times I would say, "What do you need, Sally?" And she would say, "Well, I could sure use a roll of toilet paper." Sometimes she didn't take anything. She just wanted to talk. Sally may have been hungry sometimes, and she may have needed the toilet paper. But I think what she really wanted was someone to listen to her story. I never knew what story Sally would have for me. Often, it wasn't rooted in reality, and I could make neither heads nor tails of what she was trying to tell me. But she would talk, and that need to share was evident. She would talk for 30 or 45 minutes at a time, and then she would thank me for the cereal or the toilet paper and be on her way. As I prepared to address this third theme for the summer series, what do you need? My mind kept going back to Richmond and Sally and the weight of need in the community. Sometimes need is evident. Sometimes when someone says they need food, they really need food. Other times, the basic need for food and shelter is just the first layer of a stack of deeper layers of need. This summer sermon series challenges us to be there for people in their moments of hurt and need. It challenges us to walk with them through their most troubled times and to be there for the most troubled among us. If we have asked someone what they need and they share with us, then I think we have a responsibility to hear them, to listen to what they say. We've asked them to open up the layers of pain and to be vulnerable for us. And we have committed ourselves to helping them in whatever way we can. When Jesus was face to face with a person in need, a miracle story usually followed. Of course, we can't produce miracles like Jesus, but we can help provide for the basic needs and be present with those who have deeper needs. We can see people for who they are, people created and loved by God. We can listen to their stories. We can open our hearts to their need and along with them ask for God's help. When our scripture from James tells us that faith without works is dead, he is talking about our responsibility as disciples of Christ to do what we can to help meet the basic needs of one another. And he specifically names food and clothing. In the Gospel of Luke, when Jesus is asked who this neighbor is that we're supposed to love, he tells that story about someone who is very hurt and in desperate need of medical help. We are called to be that kind of neighbor, the kind that's willing to use our resources and our time and our talents to help meet the needs of others. We're called to love like the Good Samaritan. We're called to put our faith into action. Asking what someone needs is an act of faith in God's power to meet that one's needs. And it's an act of discipleship on our part to do whatever we can to be God's agent in that moment. We can't do the miracle, but every now and then we are blessed to be part of one. And they happen all the time. Big ones, small ones, all kinds of miracles. A few years ago, I took a class in mindful communications. I was partnered with a woman who started a nonprofit to train therapy dogs. She told me about several of the things that the dogs and the people do to help others. Some of the dogs are taken to schools to help encourage children to learn to read by reading to the dogs. We have some of those dogs in our schools in this community. For a child struggling to read, it's not as embarrassing to read in front of a dog and to sound out the words and to struggle with saying them as it is in the classroom. The dog is always eager to listen. Other dogs and their handlers went to hospitals and other places. A large airport had recently contracted with this lady and her therapy dog. She and the dog would greet people as they go through security and help ease their nerves about that. But then they went throughout the airport, and they would look for people who were really nervous about flying. Flying is terrifying to some people. and the dog would help people as they waited to board the plane. She and her dog were meeting a need that I had never even considered. Our very own Charlie and Gray Kimball are great examples of loving others by meeting important needs. For several years, they have hosted a lemonade stand to raise money for a specific need at Maynard's Children's Hospital at Vidant. Some of you have probably been to their lemonade stand. They use the money to buy things like a game stations or other items for the children there. These are not just toys for the hospital. They're tools to help calm anxious children. When my children have had tests done, the child life person has brought in iPads and books and activities and different things to distract them. Some of you may have had children with that same experience and seen how well that works. When I saw how it worked, I couldn't help but wonder how many children have benefited from the generosity of Charlie and Gray Kimball and others like them who strive to meet the needs of other people. Easing anxiety of others is meeting an important need. Last year, Charlie and Gray identified another need. They raised over $5,000 in memory of their cousin Molly. The funds were given to the Children's Hospital to assist other families who have lost a child. Our Prayers and Squares group has reached out to meet a need in Africa. There are many, many children in Africa whose parents have died from AIDS. Many of the orphanages struggle to meet the needs of the children there, and as a result, some of the children sleep on dirt floors. Sewers from around the world have seen the need and are creating sleeping mats. The sleeping mats are distributed through the Foundation for Children with AIDS in Africa. And every few months, the Prayers and Squares will make 16 or 18 mats and send them to those children. They've seen pictures of these children with the mats wrapped around them, holding them close and tight, and the biggest smiles you can imagine on their faces. Like the game systems and other anxiety-relieving items that Charlie and Gray donated, the sleeping mats are about more than the mats alone. Whenever we reach out to meet a need, it is more than it seems. The cereal box in Sally's hand was an opportunity to connect. The sleeping mats are symbols that someone really cares. And I think you already know that. Meeting needs through missions is part of our identity at First Presbyterian Church. It is who we are as a church. It is why in just a few weeks, the fellowship hall and several of our classrooms will be cluttered with items waiting to be sorted and priced for Mayfest for community outreach in September this year. It is why the money raised goes to local nonprofits to meet need in our community. When we fund a grant, we're meeting more than the financial needs of a nonprofit. We're making a difference in the lives of people. I think we also already know that as a community, we're called to meet one another's needs. We have people in this congregation who regularly call and visit church members they know don't get out as much as they used to. Maybe they take them a meal or pick up a lunch. Sometimes they'll cut flowers from their yards, grown just for that purpose, to share. And sometimes when there is a crisis, a meal train is organized. Someone told me just a few weeks ago what a blessing the meal train was. For it not only helped meet the real need of a good, healthy meal, but also provided uplifting contact and encouragement from members of their church family. These are all examples of people brave enough to ask, "What do you need?" and caring enough to be part of God's miracle for another. That's what it means to be a disciple of Christ. Asking, what do you need, is an act of love. Every time we ask it, we show we care.